Hi, this is Raymond Nomizu with Clinical Research IO. CRIO is a leading CTMS, eSource, and eRegulatory software company for clinical research sites. I'm here with Luke Snedaker. He's the Vice President of Clinical Research at Lucas Research out of Morehead City, North Carolina. Luke and Lucas Research went with CRIO about 6 months ago, and they went with our eSource, eRegulatory, and CTMS solution. That's a big transition for a lot of research sites who often ask us how the onboarding process works. Luke has generously agreed to describe his experiences onboarding CRIO and how that process went and what are some best practices for sites to consider. So, Luke, thank you very much, first off, for agreeing to join us. I know you're extremely busy right now, but want to extend my appreciation on behalf of everyone listening to this.
Thanks for having me, Raymond. We're excited to be on board with CRIO and really be going through it. It's just been an absolute savior during the pandemic and everything. So we're really excited to be on board, and I'm more than happy to talk about it with you, about our
Okay.
whole experience with the transition.
Okay, terrific. So before we get into the transition, because you onboarded with us before the pandemic, so you made a decision to go electronic even before the really compelling value proposition emerged. So what can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to go down this route?
Absolutely. So we're a site with about 40 different team members and employees. We've always been in either one or two buildings close to each other. So the whole idea of working off of our own central servers, it worked okay. As we're starting to grow and expand, we learned that having our own central servers was not only a hindrance to being able to grow, but also a liability on our own, just with the whole world of whether it's ransomware attacks or anything like that, all of that going on. To be cloud-based is so much better than having your own central server. So we went with CRIO just out of a forward view of really looking at where are we going, not where we are now.
Got it.
And so we've been using eSource systems in the past. It was kind of our own homegrown eSource system that we integrated into what was a traditional EHR system. And we really had to force it to work. It wasn't built for clinical research. It was a little bit clunky, but it got the job done. But in terms of us actually growing and expanding out of our reach, it wasn't going to be the tool that we used for that. So around the turn of the year, probably at the end of 2019 really is when it was, we really started searching for what could be our solution. And we were using a clunky eSource system. We had a legacy eRegulatory system, and we had a legacy CTMS system. And they were all completely separate units. Nothing talked to each other. So that was really the stimulus that said, I think there's a better way to do this.
Got it. Got it. So you're really thinking strategically and ahead of the times. And so what were your main concerns about the onboarding process going into this?
Well, like I said, we've got about 40 team members. So just getting 40 staff members trained when they already have a full-time schedule. And that was my biggest concern, was how do you create that buy-in with the team so that they're motivated to make this change? And there's not going to be anyone that's sandbagging this change in project or the change in the way that we're doing things. And so that was number one. Number two was, we have ongoing studies. Are we going to keep those studies in our legacy systems and also start our new studies in CRIO? And now suddenly I'm requiring my investigators and coordinators and research staff to be in multiple systems, even more systems than initially. That's what I was trying to solve, not necessarily, I don't want to create a bigger problem. And we can go into that a little bit later, but we kind of came up with a plan for addressing that, and it worked pretty well. Then the other thing was obviously probably the number one question: how do the sponsors respond to this? We had a bit of insight with that because we'd been moving with using eSource before. So I wasn't super concerned. We know that there's going to be some pushback. You give them the proper documentation, which CRIO made super easy with your Part 11 matrix, the HIPAA matrix, and also the SOP that you provided. And you just provide them the documentation. As long as you've got answers here and there, the sponsor usually says, hey, no problem, go for it. And that's what we found so far, like overwhelmingly, almost no pushback. Generally, they just want the documentation to be able to put on their side that says, nope, everything's covered here. We don't have any concerns, and feel free to go about it as you were.
Yeah, good. I mean, and that's what we tell sites, so it's great to hear that from you directly. So tell me a little bit about the transition. You had the challenge of 3 different systems going onto one, and you had this question of new versus existing studies. So what was your, how did you implement, in what order?
So really what we narrowed it down to and what we implemented was from our go live date with CRIO, from the time that we were first able to put a new study in and start doing visits in CRIO, I set a time limit of about 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
With that time limit, that limit was, is a study going to have last patient visit prior to that date or after that date? If its last patient visit was going to be within about 4 months, then we didn't transition it to the eSource for CRIO. If it was going to be after that 4 months, and there was a little buffer period in there just based on making your best decision. If it was after that 4 months, we would transition it into CRIO, even if it was going to be a bit of work, just to have it end in 4 months. It was, we had to draw the line, and that's where we drew it. It worked out really well. For the eRegulatory, it was a little bit more complicated. We left our legacy eRegulatory system in place for the studies that were already ongoing, and we started all of our new studies with eRegulatory inside of CRIO.
And that, I guess I'm assuming that's because in eRegulatory, a lot of the work is front-loaded. Most of the file is probably already done by the time you get first patient in.
That's right.
So I can see that. Okay, terrific. So for eSource, there was a 4-month cutoff. So clearly you were transitioning mid-study on a lot of existing studies. Okay, and so you went through the notice period. I assume you had already told the sponsors you were using this system, and then you told the sponsors you're switching over to this new system called CRIO.
Yep.
You had the documentation. They already approved it once, so approving it again is probably no big deal. And then you started, you built your templates, I assume, the eSource templates in CRIO, and then started doing visits on a certain date. Is that how you did it? And just had a cutoff date?
Yep, exactly. So I like to, our coordinators, I really try to make them self-sustaining, almost working semi-autonomously. We try to work with them to run their own small business essentially with their studies, and it's one of the big motivating factors for them. So I made sure that they were on board with learning the eSource, using your training programs and going through the eSource builder, and getting them on board with that meant that they were excited to move forward. They suddenly realized they didn't have to write their source on paper anymore. They didn't have to write it using our clunky old eSource system. The builder that you guys had was a big reason that we went with CRIO, was just the intuitiveness of it. Of you just build the source, you add the procedures in, and it's step by step by step. It's really simple and straightforward. And that was one of the main reasons that CRIO won us over your competitors, was the simplicity of the eSource builder, and also how comprehensive it is with adding alerts and things like that. So yeah, I had the coordinators do their trainings prior to actual go live date. We built out some of the source and made sure that we had, at least a good runway of visits completed, so that when we started the study, we said we set a date for each study and said this is the go live date for this one, and everything moving forward goes into CRIO.
I see. Okay, and so I assume you didn't transcribe any data from the old system to the new system. It was only go forward data, right? Okay. What?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say usually conmeds and AEs need to be retranscribed. I'm assuming.
We did transcribe that. So we transcribed AEs, medical history, and conmeds, just so the investigators don't necessarily have to be checking two systems. They can kind of have everything in one place. But that was a mission, and that was on the coordinators to, whether or not they needed help or they could do it themselves, we let them really do a lot of data entry and get that done. But like you said, it was mostly med history and conmeds, but it was a painful period, but it was short.
Yeah. Okay. And then after everything else going forward is in CRIO. So there was a period where there might have been a couple systems in terms of EC entry queries, monitors, but I would imagine after the next monitoring visit, it was all in CRIO at that point, and you didn't have to refer back to the old data that much.
Right.
Yeah.
And
got it.
what we did as well was we can pretty easily print out all of our old source from the old eSource system, and we went ahead and scanned it into the CRIO.
Okay.
We maintain it in the old eSource system. That's our source, obviously.
Got
but
it.
We put that certified copy into CRIO so that the monitor can use that. But as long as we maintain the old one, they can reference it if they have to. But all of our certified copies are just fine to use for them for day-to-day visits.
Okay. So you did. So you used our functionality where you can mark a visit completed outside of CRIO, and then you uploaded the completed source document, certified as a copy, and now it's actually all there in one system.
Yep, and that happened. What was neat about that was we could do that way after the fact.
Got
When
it.
I started setting deadlines of we need to be in CRIO by this date, the team got it done, knowing that there were things that we could do kind of along the way through the study as we went.
Got it. And how many coordinators are we talking about,
We've got
roughly?
11 coordinators right now.
Okay. And did you have it so that each of them was responsible for designing their own study, or did you have a small team designing all of them?
I know that it may be non-conventional, but we do have our coordinators design each of their own source.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
a big part of keeping them accountable and responsible for
Mm,
their studies. They have
sure.
tremendous resources available to them, which with help building those, and they always get validated prior to the study start. So we go through and check the source, make sure everything looks good, compare it to the protocol. Our PI gets to look at the source and just make sure everything's good. But I do want each of the coordinators to write it themselves
Yeah.
based on our standard templates we have for our procedures. So
Okay.
we start standard procedure templates, and then the coordinators get to customize everything from there, whether it's personal reminders for different things or different alerts that they want to remind them of when to get an investigator or not.
Got it. And so when they converted over, they already had templates to work off of. So it was mostly just making sure that just translating that into the Creo system.
Right.
Okay. And you still had a QC process, sounds like, where another
Mhm.
party looked at it and made sure that the Creo resource was valid. Good. And talk a little bit about the training for that, because you said that was one of your biggest concerns was getting a large group of people like that. 11 is a lot of coordinators to buy
Yeah.
into a new system and the change. How did that go?
Right. So it's not even just 11 coordinators, like I'm sure you know. As a we're a combination endocrinology clinic as well as a clinical research site. But all of our team members are dedicated to the research department at the same time. So we don't have anyone who's not fully involved in clinical research. So that means that our administrative team is scheduling in CRIO. Our clinical research coordinators are obviously completing the visits in CRIO. All of our providers are investigators or sub-investigators, and we have a full set of research assistant staff that are completing the initial visits, like whether it's vitals, going through ConMeds, things like that in CRIO as well. So we had about 40 team members that needed to train on this, and fairly quickly. Your CRIO Academy was pretty incredible,
Oh,
honestly.
great.
Yeah, the we're so used to trainings that are 45 minutes long of the droned out talking, and you can just see everyone's eyes glass over when they're
Mm,
going through that. They're not learning anything with something
right.
like that. They're wasting time watching a TV while it's talking to them. CRIO Academy was short 1 to 3 minute videos, kept your attention, hit the point, separated into specific segments so that if one of them needs to learn, how do I do this in the eSource, they can just type it in and find it, and it's right there, a quick, short, to the point video in eSource. And so a lot of the feedback that I got from the team was when I said, go do the trainings, please, like, here's the website, here's how you log in. They came back and they were just like, that was a breeze. Why can't all the trainings do this? It was, you guys clearly know a lot about training, and you've probably put your team through those trainings multiple times because it was phenomenal. It was a nice surprise.
That's great to hear. Yeah, all our new employees go through that training, so we eat our own dog food. And we provide a certain amount of custom training. So how did you work out, the standard training, which is self-service versus the custom training that comes with every activation package?
So we assigned a few team members to go through the custom training and just kind of be like the super users. They were the
Okay,
ones that really needed to know in depth so that while everyone else is learning, it was easy to have in-house someone that really knew what they were talking about. And your team did a great job of bringing us on board and going through that initial training process. I think I was a part of it and just a few others where they set us up with learning to build the eSource, learning to go through everything, how to be the administrator, the importance of making sure everyone learns. But it, I almost with the trainings that you guys had, that almost wasn't necessary, other than just a few problem troubleshooting here and there. But especially with once we learned about the help function on
yeah,
CRIO, where someone is there, it seems like every single day, and they answer within like less than a minute. Um, that's been huge. Someone will come to me and ask, and I'm like, hey, I'm a little bit busy. You should have the little help desk there. Just ask them. And they're like, really? They're going to get back to me? And I'm like, they're going to get back to you faster than you could send an email. So that was super useful and helpful. And I think a huge part of how the team got on board so quickly was the ability to speak with either one of the super users you trained or one of your actual, users on the other end of CRIO that could walk us through what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who are not familiar with CRIO, tell people what the help desk function in CRIO is like. How you access it? How does it work?
So when you get into CRIO, it's basically the web page, and you're logged in to the actual eSource system and the eReg system. It's kind of like your dashboard of all of your studies. And just in the top right corner is a button that I don't remember exactly what it says. Hold on. It says live chat now. And when you click live chat now, as long as it's within regular business hours, a CRIO team member comes up on the other end and says, how can I help you? You ask the question, they can, go in on the back end, see what you're looking at. You can send them attachments and snippets of maybe something that you're seeing that you can't explain, and they'll walk you through. I've had multiple times where I go to that person, to the help chat desk, live chat desk, and they won't be able to answer, but they say, I'll be back in 5 minutes, or let me respond to you through this real quick. And they'll run maybe up the chain or get a software engineer or something on it quickly and get the problem solved and come back to me with an answer like same day.
Yeah.
And that's just incredible customer service, which is huge. Sometimes we have a patient on site, and when we have a patient on site, I can't wait 4 days for that something to be fixed, but you guys just respond quickly. It gets resolved. Usually it's something on our end where we just weren't using something correctly, and they walk us through it. It's quick and easy.
Right. So you don't give your name, phone number, write down a case ID, get some kind of email, blanket email saying we'll get back to you, and then wait 24 hours. None of that.
No, it's live action. It's basically like them picking up the phone.
Yeah, yeah. Great. And so it sounds like the custom training might have been useful as a supplement or complement on top of the standard training, right? So for that small group of CVPs, I'm assuming you did the CRIO Academy first, and then leveraged the custom training to really hone in on the questions that you had and the ambiguities that still existed. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Good. And how did you transition over the CTMS? So you've got a lot of financial budgets, right? How did you do that transition?
So for the CTMS, I think for our CTMS transition, we basically took our database of patients and wanted all that demographics information transferred over to CRIO. For the budgets, because we didn't transfer any budget information initially. It was that we had legacy studies in a legacy system. We kind of treated that similar to the eSource. If it was before 4 months or after 4 months that last patient visit would occur, is what decided if we would transition the budgets. But we did that. The budgets are pretty straightforward to put in CRIO. You add the visit. Once you build the source, you add the visit, you assign a dollar amount to it, and it just kind of works. It's one of the coolest parts about it, and one of the reasons that I champion CRIO to any and every site that I talk with right now is just the automation between eSource and the CTMS system is absolutely phenomenal. They talk to each other, the information moves back and forth, whether you're making invoices or trying to make sure that you got all of your auto pay visits paid for. It's just phenomenal. And so the budget side, we did enter our budgets manually just because we like to have control over that. But that was like the most minor part of the entire transition. Is very straightforward. We're just taking numbers and putting it into boxes.
So because the eSource triggers the financials, you decide to align your financial transition with the eSource transition.
Correct.
So you kept the two together. Okay, so if it moved to the CRIO eSource on a certain date, then all the financials moved over to CRIO from that date forward. And then the old financial information was still stored in the legacy system?
Right.
Okay, got it.
And so we obviously had to close out invoices and close out payments in the old legacy system. But as that all starts tapering down, it becomes nothing.
Got it. So you had your receivables in two places. You got a payment that straddled it both. You might apply it here, apply it in CRIO, and after a few payment cycles, everything's in the CRIO system at that point.
We've got a small finance team, and it was a cakewalk for them. It was not a big deal at all. One of the things that I was really excited about was because of the automation that is available in CRIO, we were actually able to reduce the size of our finance team, and that team member is super excited to be moving into recruitment and also more of the research. It was one of those transitions that happened. opportunities arose and we didn't have a need for something, so, or for one position anymore, so we moved them into another that became available because of CRIO. And
Yeah.
so that team member used to work on basically trying to keep up with the business we were already doing. And instead now they're helping to grow the business, which is all you could ever ask for as, you know, a leader.
That's the ROI. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
we like to say is take your pick. You get savings, or in your case, you reinvest that to
Yeah.
growth. So, which is
Yep.
even bigger ROI.
Yep.
That's good to hear. And how did the patient data migration work? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, it was absolutely a breeze. I mean, some of these things that we're talking about, I almost don't remember very much of, which is great because that means it wasn't a bad time. It just happened so smoothly that there wasn't any issues. The CTMS migration, I think we migrated about 3,000 patients worth of information. You know, just all different types of demographics, medications, all that kind of stuff, and it just came over. Like I think it was in the middle of the holiday season that you were doing the migration too, and there was I don't remember the exact name of the team member you had that did it for us, but super easy communication. Let us know when it was ready to be reviewed, and we reviewed it. I didn't find any issues despite the hundreds of data point checks that I did. And it was just like, go. We just did it. And that was really neat.
Yeah. You gave us the data in Excel. We imported
Mhm.
it, told you it was ready. You checked it, and sounds like we didn't lose any data.
Nope.
We got all the data in.
Yep.
And then from that point forward, once the data was done, your team could start doing the recruiting
Right.
after that. And there
Yep.
was probably a brief period during the migration where maybe there's some interactions you wanted to record that you probably had to re-record in CRIO because they wouldn't have come over in that initial Excel period. So there might have been a little bit of a gap period,
Yeah.
um, which I assume you just maybe maintained separately and then
The
updated.
the turnaround time was less than a week, which
Yeah.
I think was pretty that was pretty phenomenal. We just did a different on our clinical side, we did a data migration. It was a bit bigger, but I mean the data migration period was 8 weeks. And so you collect a lot of information in 8 weeks. That gap that you were talking about just now is a huge problem. So the fact that you all turned around in less than a week and got our information in there meant it was, you know, almost nothing to input those few patient data points that we collected in that time.
Yeah, we know how critical that is for research, and that's the lifeblood of all of your study performance.
Right.
Well, fantastic. Sounds like all elements went well. Is there any aspect of the implementation that we haven't covered yet, or do you think we covered everything?
Just notifying the sponsors
Yeah.
was super easy. We basically, I think you provided some documentation that was basically just like a template, a
Yeah,
letter.
we have a notification template that you can just copy and paste.
Yeah, we use that. I handed out to the coordinators and just said, hey, send this off to your sponsors. If you get any
Yep.
queries, feel free to respond. If they want more information, send them on to me. And
Yep.
there was
And how did the
nothing.
CRAs react, the individual CRAs? Did you show them the training video?
Yeah, so we send them the training video. We actually have a neat little printout that we send them that tells them about our area, tells them about the hotels, and tells them the different trainings we need them to do before they come on site with us. And we
I
just
see.
added the CRIO trainings into that, and they love it. They really do. You know, is once we figured out how to like put the files in an organized fashion and how to make sure that the source is easy to read, the monitors just ate it up. I mean, they
Hmm.
come in and they don't even need our computers anymore. They don't have to access special servers of ours. They've got their own unique login that goes right into the CRIO system, and they're on their way. It's the system's so intuitive on their side, they don't even ask questions anymore. We used to be
That's
down
great.
there. We used to go down there. If we had a monitor on site who was fairly new to us, that coordinator would have to be in that office, you know, every other hour showing them how to do something. And with CRIO, you basically get no questions at all.
Yeah, I tell people the CRA training video is about 6 minutes long for eSource, 5, 6 minutes on eReg, and people don't believe that that's sufficient, but it is. That's all you really need.
If they know how to use a computer, they're going to know how to use CRIO. It's
Yeah,
super
it's
intuitive.
pretty intuitive. And how did you, with the pandemic, right? So you implemented this before the pandemic, actually probably about halfway through when the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
Did you start putting travel restrictions on the monitors? Did anyone start using this for remote purposes?
The monitors put travel restrictions on themselves a long time before we put them on them. But also we did start to get really cracked down. We're out in kind of a rural area, so we weren't quite as impacted, but we did understand that we need to put some restrictions on the monitors. And we gave them the ability to remotely access CRIO, and it's been, like I said, they're keeping up with their monitoring.
Hmm.
We have studies that have upwards of 100 subjects enrolled, and so when doing monthly visits, so if the monitor doesn't come on site for a month or 2 months or 3 months, sometimes that's a ton of backlog work for them.
Yeah.
And we start to look at that as, hey, the sponsor's not doing their part to keep up with it. So to be able to remotely access all of the eSource and eReg for those studies has just been a lifesaver. It really has. They keep up with it. They get to continue doing monitoring. The only things they have to come on site for is IP reconciliation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And that should
monitoring
help.
consent.
Yeah. Yeah. And that should help you as a site, because the last thing you want is, 5 people coming to your site for camp out for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing you want is any payments being held up because the data hasn't been verified.
Right. Right. And with CRIO, we have the tool to basically push the sponsors into doing remote monitoring visits without us having to redact and copy
Right.
and fax, and and then that gets more expensive for the sponsor, more expensive for us in time. It's more expensive and just time. That whole remote monitoring visit system is so archaic. We've basically just told them, no, you're going to use CRIO, and I promise it's going to save everyone money and time, and it's all per SOPs. So
And they
once
accept that.
they accept that, once we really lay it out and say, here's our SOP. I know that you have your SOPs, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. Let's look at what you've got going on, and we work with them to get them logged into CRIO and see how secure and straightforward it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's eye-opening a lot of times. And have you experimented at all with getting reimbursement for that access, especially after the pandemic, or have you not tried that?
For the remote access,
Yeah,
or for using CRIO in
both.
general?
I guess you
For
can
both.
call it one or the other, kind of the
Yeah.
same thing.
No, I mean, it's hit or miss. We always try to, especially with the remote access, when we feel like we're actually doing them a favor and saving the entire study money. We try to be reimbursed for that in some way, but it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
They're coming around to it. In terms of like eReg and things like that, they don't even bat an eye at. They're like, yeah, no problem. Here, have this. Here, have that.
Oh, so
But
you are getting the reimbursement on the eReg side.
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But for eSource, it's a little bit tougher. I think after the
A little
pandemic,
newer.
it's newer, and it's one of those things where they kind of understand we're probably going to be doing it anyway, and they think they can get away with it. Since the pandemic, we've really pushed it, and they're coming around.
Yeah.
They're coming around a lot. They see the value and the benefit of it. They see that they don't have to have the CRAs travel as much. They don't have to
Yeah.
have they don't have to put people on site. They don't have to coordinate all these different meetings and things like that and times that their CRAs are on site. So
Yeah.
we we even the things that we keep on paper, we scan into CRIO so that it can be remotely accessed, and it's just part of our process now.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've definitely gotten that same feedback from a lot of sites who are saying sponsors are a lot more receptive. So I think eSource reimbursement will be the same trajectory as eRegulatory.
Yep.
And soon these systems will basically cost the sites nothing,
Right. Right.
not to mention the savings. So, all right, terrific. Well, I guess in closing, do you have any thoughts that you would offer up a site that's about to go through an implementation of CRIO? Any best practices you could offer about what made it particularly successful for you?
I would say you've got to create buy-in with your team. CRIO
Yeah.
has all the tools, all the trainings, all of everything necessary at your disposal to make this successful. It's going to be up to the leaders of each individual site to get their team excited and create that buy-in. One of the best things that I feel like I did with my coordinators during this whole decision-making process was I let them have a voice during it. When we sat in on demonstrations, I'd bring in 4 and 5 of them at a time and set aside an hour for them and say, hey, let's go through this. You're going to be the one using it. And we had disagreements on which system to go with, but the fact that they got to have that say and they got to go through it with us meant that at the end they felt the buy-in.
Yes.
And as a leader, that buy-in is everything. It makes the entire process easy. So between having a small business owner mentality for our coordinators, as well as them having the buy-in of deciding the software we went with, they took it and ran. I was never pushing. I was never pressing. I made everything available to them, and they run with it. And so that would be my biggest insight to anyone that's doing this is treat your team with the respect they need, and they're going to see the value of this system themselves, and they're going to run with it. And they're going to do things for your business that you never thought they could.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's terrific
I know that was
advice.
I know that was a little bit philosophical, more so than like a technical.
It was spot on.
But it was what I think is genuinely the most important piece of what we did in the transition.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And the one thing we say to our new clients is, look, we'll give you all the tools to be successful, but ultimately we can't drive your organization forward. That's your job as a leader.
Yep.
So I think that you nailed it. So all right. Well, thank you so much, Luke. Appreciate your time, and best of luck with you.
For sure. Absolutely. And thanks for everything. The system's incredible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Woo. All right, we're done.
Cool.